Ложные друзья переводчика. In this lesson, we will discuss false friends, or in Russian, ложные друзья переводчика. I will introduce the concept of false friends so you will be aware of them as you continue your study of Russian. We will also go over a preliminary list of false friends to start looking out for now. The ultimate goal of this lesson is to develop mastery over the correct usage of words in Russian. This is in order to develop our communicative competence. Using words correctly and being understood correctly when we use them is to have achieved the goal of communicative competence. It is important to look out for false friends because when we are learning to think in a foreign language, sometimes our instinct is to apply what we already know, or to go by similarity to our own language. However, this is not always a foolproof method, making special practice with these tricky terms necessary. We will first illustrate the concept of false friends before moving on to a list of nouns, followed by a list of adjectives. This lesson will end with a practice exercise. What do we mean by false friends? False friends refers to a pair of words that look similar based on the way they are written and pronounced, but actually have different meanings. First, let's take a look at some easy examples. Sometimes, learning Russian is very easy. Words like passport, chocolate, music, and airport can be expressed in Russian very simply, since the Russian words are so similar to the English ones. Passport, chocolate, muzika, aeroport. However, sometimes things are a little more complicated, and that's where ложные друзья переводчика come in. Это фамилия? Нет, это семья. Familia may look like family, but it actually means last name, which is not what's shown in the picture on the left. This makes familia a false friend, or a word in disguise. Can you think of any other false friends? Here are just a few more easy examples. Now, let's move on to some words with which you may be less familiar. Here are some nouns with their false friends. We know these are false friends, so let's cross them out and get the correct translations. A party where you meet people to talk and have fun is a вечеринка. Think of it as a fun evening, вечер. The receipt for something you purchase is a квитанция. This is actually a true friend of the archaic English word quittance. A poem is a стихотворение, which we get from стих, line, and творение, creation. The word for repetition, повторение, comes from the verb повторить, as in повторите, пожалуйста. Do it a second time. A decade is a десятилетие, from 10 лет. Here are some more nouns. Again, let's cross out the false friends and go over the correct translations. You may be surprised to see angina on this list. It's a heart condition that causes chest pain. We'll return to the reason angina made it onto the list soon, but the correct Russian translation for the heart condition is stenocardia. The word for insult is оскорбление, coming from the verb pair оскорблять, оскорбить. An anecdote can be expressed as either a рассказ or a случай. A lunatic in Russian is сумасшедший, человек, который сошел с ума. Lastly, a preservative used in food is a консервант. Next, let's revisit the false friends and see what they actually mean. Партия refers to a political party. Recept, depending on the context, can be a recipe for a dish or a prescription for a drug. Poema is specifically an epic poem or verse narrative. Every poema is a poem, but not every poem is a poema. Repetitia is a rehearsal. Decada is a period of 10 days, not 10 years. Angina is a word you may have heard in Russian more often than angina in English. That's because angina technically refers to tonsillitis, but it's also sometimes used as a catch-all term for a sore throat. In any case, the Russian word has nothing to do with heart conditions or chest pain. Insult is also a medical word, referring to a stroke. An anecdote in Russian is specifically a funny story or a joke. Lunatic, far from being an insult, refers to a sleepwalker. And be very careful with презерватив because it has nothing to do with preservatives. Next, let's take a look at some adjectives. Once again, we have some Russian words in the middle that look like the English ones to the left. Let's revisit the false friends in the middle after we go over the correct translations to the right. If something is familiar, it is знакомый, which also means acquaintance. It can also be привычный, like привычка, which means habit. Accurate can be translated as точный, exact or precise, or правильный, which is correct. Delicate is тонкий, which is also subtle or thin. It can also be нежный, which is closer to tender. An intelligent person is разумный, just умный, or сообразительный. Actual is фактический or действительный. Adequate is closest to достаточный, or more judgmentally, it can be посредственный. As for the false friends, they are close in meaning, but subtly different from the English words. Take familiarny, for example, which means overly or inappropriately familiar. Аккуратный describes neat, punctual, or careful, aspiring to accuracy, but not strictly accurate. Delikatny in Russian refers to the subset of delicate that deals with people's feelings, so tactful, considerate, or in a rather different use of the word, ticklish. Intelligentny refers to cultured, educated, or urbane rather than smart. Aktualny means current or relevant, so when a Russian says aktualna, they don't mean actually. Adekvatny in Russian focuses more on the positive than the English adequate. It means appropriate or corresponding to a given standard. Now that we've learned what false friends are and gone over several vocabulary items, let's put our new knowledge to use by helping a translator who has fallen into many false friend traps. The English text to the right of the screen is the original. The Russian is a translation. The errors in translation are highlighted in red. How would you fix this translation? You may pause the video at this point if you would like to work on this exercise. In 5 seconds, I will reveal the corrected version of the translation. Here is the corrected version of our text. Let me briefly summarize the changes. Magazine has become journal. Бисквит has become печенье. Аккуратный has become правильный. Презерватив has become консервант. Интеллигентный has become разумный. Familiarный has become знакомый. This concludes this lesson on false friends. Thank you for viewing.